Social deduction isn't a new game concept in the slightest. Social deduction games follow the same core premise no matter which way you put it, informed minority versus uninformed majority. Ever since the introduction of Mafia, we have seen countless takes on the genre, including Werewolf, Secret Hitler, Trouble in Terrorist Town, Secrets, Mind Night, Throne of Lies, Town of Salem. I could go on. All of these range with various degrees of complexity and layers of strategy, and while all of them are successful in their own right, none of them have seen the community that Among Us has produced. A large part of that is due to the low entry point and accessibility. It's free on mobile devices, perfect for on-the-go play. There's no reason that you can't play this game if you don't want to. Yet, even so, people seem to be coming back to this game, even though for years it hasn't really changed. No new mechanics have been introduced, the same strategies that were effective years ago are still effective today, and while new maps have been given to the community, the core gameplay loop has seen little alterations. Yet people are still drawn to this game and its simplicity. Something about this game seems to be bringing people back in again and again to experience it. The same scenarios playing out just with different people, the same game states occurring and the same pretense with the same choices to be made by us just as different players. This game somehow has us returning to figure out who done it time after time. The game itself is about stealth, about lying through your teeth, about accusing others, about putting everything together, and yet while that's all true, it doesn't explain why it's so appealing to play. Why, no matter what the situation most of the time, we feel as if we have impact on the game at hand. And it's all because of a simple truth about the brilliant design of this game that has gone undetected for too long. Among Us is really a game about control. Now, you may hear that and be thinking, what on earth do I mean? But let me address how similar games go about their core gameplay mechanics and compare it to Among Us. Social deduction games and their mechanics vary a fair bit depending on the title, but traditionally you'll see the minority eliminating the majority through killing them directly, and the majority having to discern their own from the minority, typically with a majority vote. To ensure people aren't just randomly eliminated, these games offer methods to find the minority. There are 3 ways developers achieve this in my opinion, and it all depends on the game. In Werewolf, Throne of Lies, Town of Salem, and similar Mafia-style games, this is achieved by granting certain players in the majority abilities. These abilities alone can't definitively state someone's allegiance, generally they only allude to it. This fact, which is known to everyone, grants the minority counterplaying claims. Only when these clues are all put together, however, can we state someone's true intentions with relative certainty. For example, Town of Salem sees 2 main investigative roles in the minority, the sheriff and the investigator. The investigator is told the possible role of a player from a list of 3 options, all preset depending on their actual role of the person you investigated. Ignoring any outside interaction, you get a general idea of the purpose of that player, however you can't specifically identify them without more information. However, in combination with the sheriff, whose ability allows them to see if someone's in the mafia or not, these 2 roles can easily identify possible minority members and confirm majority ones, while however making you a massive target. I've glossed over this really quickly as I want to touch on this in another video, but you will notice how in these games, players perform actions in a turn order with an initiative system in place, so that roles that act against certain characters have a clearly defined hierarchy of what overrules what. These types of roles are given to the minority team, and overall giving them control of how the game progresses and the flow of a match. As such, these games are what I call minority controlled. The majority is aiming to investigate the group as a whole, remaining alive long enough to form a block of trusted individuals to have enough votes and win the game. This differs from the style used in Trouble in Terrorist Town, Deceit, and many other social deduction games that have real-time gameplay. These games offer means of definitively stating someone's allegiance through a scanner or a tester of some description. However, a majority of the time, the minority is found out by actively accomplishing their tasks or goals and being seen while doing so. An example of this being in TTT, where traitors are found most often when attempting to kill someone. These games default to a majority win if an action occurs in the minority, putting the onus to act onto them. As such, the majority simply has to pressure the minority to slip up in order to come out victorious. In these games, we see that the majority has control of the game and how it flows, and as such they are majority controlled. The minority is tasked with performing action while also getting away with it, eventually having the numbers to overpower the majority. For both of these types of social deduction, we see how initially one side has control and it's the other team's objective to wrestle that control back. I did also mention a third style to these games of how their mechanics interact, and it's best seen in games like Coup or Secrets. Coup sees players being able to use any of the 5 characters in the game at any time, while they really only hold onto 2 in their hands. However, the cards they are using and are holding can change throughout the game. It's the other player's job at the table to call out someone for using an ability they don't have. Secrets has abilities that players can use on themselves or give to another player that actively swap the allegiances of people at the table during a round. Somewhat uniquely, you can only view your allegiance at the start of a game or when a card tells you to do so. As such, you may go through the whole game thinking you're on one team and finding out that you're actually on the opposition since round 1. These games see control shifting in correlation to the information one knows at hand. Information is not a luxury in these games, but a necessity due to the general solo nature of these games, and whoever has that is typically in a position to win. And if people know you hold the knowledge of what is happening in a given board state, then you are typically target number 1 to either ally with or eliminate. I call these games solo controlled as they often require a high level of personal social skill in order to persuade the people around you, either exaggerating the threat another player possesses or downplaying your own. So social deduction games in general play with the idea of control. We see one team or player that must attempt to keep control of the game and the other team attempting to take control away from them. They all follow distinctively unique guidelines, that being the presence of voting systems, abilities, detection methods, etc., and have different game theory behind them all concerning the jobs of the teams. Having had this all laid out, we now have to ask, where does Among Us land in this trinity of social deduction? You may think instinctively that, yeah, it has real-time gameplay, not turn-based, that makes it majority-controlled like TTT. However, you then have to realize it has a voting system that relies on group discussions similar to Town of Salem. Then some other guy bursts into the room and says, wait a minute, this game relies on knowledge being power much more than the other two, with you actively trying to convince people that other players should be taken out first, and that some players will have confirmed alibis to people who are dead. Admittedly, this point is weaker than the other two, and while I do have a feeling Among Us will see neutral roles or role conversion at some point that will lean itself towards these more solo type games, we are still faced to acknowledge the fact that Among Us can't be classified as any of the 3. It takes ideas from all of them, and this has some interesting consequences which leads to its addictive gameplay, and that's due to how it gives the player, no matter what the role, control of the game. So for the sake of analysis, let's now list the gameplay mechanics we have in Among Us. We have an informed minority versus an uninformed majority. The minority who kills majority members on a cooldown in real time, while the majority may kill members through plurality voting during meetings, which pauses the game and is called when a body is found or the emergency button is pressed while no sabotages are active. The majority can confirm themselves through the use of visual tasks, and they can also pseudo-confirm themselves through evicting imposters, witness testimony, evidence of location and map layout, and persuasion. To win, the minority must equal the number of alive majority members or pull off an essential sabotage to win, where the majority must finish tasks. The minority can also use the vent system around the map, lock down doors, and activate sabotages that disrupt the majority. And that's pretty much it. Listing it out, it doesn't seem like much when compared to the essays we could write for other games. However, the way the devs have introduced these unique mechanics really show us the masterful design behind this game. Let's begin with how players go about eliminating others. Among Us is very well known for its voting system, something akin to what we see in Mafia-esque games. We see the group as a whole discuss evidence, accuse players, and eventually vote on who they believe should be eliminated, if anyone at all. This is very typical of minority-controlled games, where they hold control as the majority must aim to be correct to be effective. This is possibly even more prevalent than in other social deduction games, as a plurality vote is needed over a majority, meaning that minority groups can easily influence the direction of votes during discussion to make their jobs that much easier. Yet, unlike minority-controlled games, we see a complete lack of roles throughout and no real investigative options in the meetings. The evidence that players present is only from the real-time portion of gameplay, leaning it towards a majority-controlled game. Furthermore, due to the lack of powers held by players, this game leans upon one's social skills and ability to convince and relatively be more likable than other players, making it feel solo controlled while not having the mechanics of such a game. Minority members go about killing majority players in real time just like majority controlled games, with the onus to act placed firmly on them. Minority members can only kill players safely under certain conditions and circumstances, such as them not being seen by other members and being able to escape the corpse's location, which, if the crew is playing a theoretical perfect game, will never occur. However, unlike other games, the minority members can shift the onus to act onto the majority through the use of the sabotage system. It's actually a really clever mechanic when you think about it, allowing the minority to distract players and get away with kills in circumstances where they otherwise wouldn't, and makes pinpointing what we can say about this game really hard. If you can't tell what I'm getting at here, let me spell it out. Control in this game shifts, and it shifts regularly. In the real-time phase of the game where players are completing tasks, the majority team is in power. This is because the minority can only perform kills in certain conditions. The majority can force imposters to be unable to realistically kill by just being present and aware of their location. Yet the minority can get out of this by the sabotage and vent system, along with locational awareness of other players and creating alibis for themselves by intentionally being seen. Competent imposters are easily in control of the flow of the game, and while their actions are dictated by the crew, a minority member who knows how to get themselves out of these scenarios is easily able to take charge. This integrates with the meeting mechanics. Now being minority controlled, the majority, now holding the onus to act, can take hold of these meetings through logical deduction. The visual tasks in this game offer a chance for the majority to confirm certain members who can act as guaranteed confirmed witnesses to events that played out before the meeting, and using these people as quasi-leaders of meetings allows the majority to get a foothold in conversation. And obviously you have testimony and alibi that in combination with map knowledge allows the majority to easily work out imposters. However, there is counterplay to every interaction that occurs in this game between the two teams, and it's this design philosophy that developers have integrated into this game that creates the illusion of control for both teams in any situation. The mechanics are simple, defined, and yet created with a level of awareness about how players go about using them. While there is a strategy, there's a strategy against that, and possibly even one against that. In a never-ending arms race of moves and plays and decisions for both teams to make, both wrestle for control and can feel as if they have it. The majority may always be hunted, but they only need to catch someone mess up once, while the minority, who will always be under scrutiny, have access to mechanics to allow them to avoid it. It's a perfect yin-yang of design, which leads on to my final point. Let me preface this with a fact. Did you know that it is very much possible to play a perfect game as the crew? Through thinking of us, players, as perfect rational operators in this system, crew members can always win with a bit of planning and coordination. Assuming you play in games with 10 people for 1 or 2 imposters, splitting up into specific groups allows for a variety of scenarios where the majority will always win. Don't believe me? Well, let's imagine a 1 imposter scenario and work up from there. Let's assume in these hypothetical scenarios that a crew member decides to call an emergency meeting straight into the game to get all players to agree to this system, with anyone not agreeing being voted out immediately at the next meeting. If this system is foolproof, then all rational majority members will agree to it as it guarantees them a win, meaning that minority members will have to agree as to blend in and not be outed. This method uses a buddy group system, meaning that all members will stay together within line of sight at all times and won't interact with another group, staying far away from other teams. However, we assume the worst case scenario within these groups and games, that being that no player has any visual tasks, and due to the light sabotage, no members within a group know who killed a player, just that a player is dead and one of them did it. The 1 imposter scenario has a few options as to group selections, but I'm going to use the most efficient method for completing tasks. Of the 10 players, split the groups into a 3-3-4 allocation. I prefer this to a 5-5 split as discussed by other prominent YouTubers, as it more often than not will lead to some players being confirmed without a reasonable doubt. All going to different directions in the map, ensuring that vents are being monitored so that no player can be in contact with another group, tasks will be completed by these teams and the imposter will have to begin killing. You can sort of see where this is heading. If an imposter kills in this situation, you can narrow down who did it. If they are in one of the 3-player groups and commits a kill, then there will only be 2 left, allowing the 7 players who are now confirmed to vote out the other 2, guaranteeing their win just due to the size of their voting block. It doesn't matter if they kill the crew member first, as the team wins together, including the dead members. If they are allocated to and kill in the 4-player group, we just then have a 3-3 split with 6 players knowing they are confirmed, allowing them to really easily vote out that other group, ensuring they get the imposter. The reason we can just sacrifice whole groups of people like this is because the way the voting system works in this game and the value of a player's life. In the 1 imposter game mode with 10 people, you can think of it being that 1 imposter is worth 9 normal players, so if you can remove that imposter by sacrificing the lives of 8 or less, then it's worth it considering you will all win. This methodology applies to the other imposter counts as well. Now, you never actually play a 10-player game with 1 imposter, but it's the thought exercise that warms us for 2 imposters. One thing you may have realized from the previous example and use of groups, and from your own experience, is that the tactic described works all the way to 4-player games. Assuming a worst case scenario of oxygen sabotage, you can simply split into groups of 2 and wait for the imposter to act. If you see a lone member at any point, you call an emergency meeting. So, with all of this, assuming rational players and such, crew members will always win in scenarios where 1 imposter and anywhere from 4 to 10 players remain. This is important and something we can use. So in 2-player games, let's follow a scenario of how the groups can be split, realizing that whenever we see 1 imposter and 4 to 10 players remain, crew members have won. Let's use the same 3-3-4 split of players and see all the different permutations of how this could end up. We have the 2 imposters together in the 3 or 4 player groups, the imposters spread between the 4 and 1 3-player group, or we have both imposters spread between the 3-player groups. In the scenario both players end in the same group, after a body is found, simply killing off that whole group that experienced the kill wins the game for the crew every time. In instances where 1 kill is committed, the majority holds enough votes to easily get rid of the whole group, and in instances where they both kill, eliminating the group with fewer members resolve this. In instances where imposters are together in an assigned group, this leads to an immediate win. If only 1 imposter is killed, the crew ends up in the worst case scenario of a 5-to-1 situation, which, as described before, leads to a crew victory assuming rationality. This means that the crew will always win due to the votes they hold as a block, and the fact that 1 imposter is worth 4 crew in this setting, having to kill 3 crew to ensure an imposter death is still viable. No matter the layout of groups, the game is won so long as people stick to the design. This now all crumbles a bit when we talk about 3-player games with this model. And while you can adapt it to smaller group sizes, it does venture out the realm of feasibility just as imposters can rely on each other to not give their location away and such. And while some situations can guarantee a crew win, it's not always, just depending on how random allocation lands. That being said, if people want me to make a whole 20-minute video on Perfect Among Us strategy and how you can win your games, I would definitely discuss this. But for now, we can obviously see that there are some flaws with the methods and models we have described here, most notably that we are ignoring kill cooldowns, emergencies, and the fact that imposters can't be coordinated with their kills. However, it successfully illustrates the point I'm trying to get across here. The game theory of high-level Among Us is immensely dense and full of strategy. That's the thing about this game. The way it plays with control is not only on a mechanical level, but also control of other people. A sort of smug satisfaction knowing what will happen fills players with power. Not only that, but the fact that the level of game theory you can play is near infinite. It's like rock, paper, scissors. When versing a stranger, ignoring any general trends in society, it can be considered random, but versing someone you know or are aware of allows you to begin to predict what they're going to throw. But then the awareness of people knowing what you're going to throw to counter continues and infinitely repeats between 2 rational players, to the point where random chance will decide the outcome. Where on earth am I going with this? Among Us is a rational game where people playing perfectly will always win. But, and somewhat fortunately, we never do play perfectly. By listening to me over the last few minutes, you would think that this game keeps control in the majority, yet we ignore the mechanics in this game that incite chaos, most notably sabotages and the fact that we all make mistakes. While yes, Among Us is a game that can be controlled by the crew in every nature and scenario, we never see these perfect games in action thanks to the game's casual nature. Now, I have no doubt that metas and strategies will permeate the game if it ever gets a more official competitive setup, but the fact is that Among Us is an incredible game. It plays with control on a physical level in the game, a mental level between players, a psychological level between friends, and a theoretical level during analysis. The way Among Us weaves game flow and control together while ensuring that no players feel lost or unable to regain their control in some way is something that can really be admired. The way it has carefully crafted mechanics that allow every player to feel like they're having an impact regardless whether or not they actually do. Where in games like Town of Salem and Mind Night you sometimes feel as if you're screwed with no plays left to make, Among Us inspires strategic thinking and encourages immense counterplay with options to every situation, and I can't wait to see where social deduction goes in the near future thanks to this rise of the absolute gem of design Among Us is.